What's up, Falcons fans, and welcome to episode 1 of a very special project I'm excited to introduce you to today. This is Talking Birdie, an Atlanta Falcons podcast powered by sportstalkatl.com. I am your host, Matt Karoly. You can find me on Twitter at Matt Karoly, MattKaroly. And for those of you that don't know who I am, I've been covering the Falcons since 2016 when I first started writing for Blogging Dirty. And then I moved on to RiseUpReader.com in 2017. Rest in peace, Rise Up Reader. And most recently, I was the better half of Falcons Central Radio alongside Aaron Freeman. But it's been a minute since I've been back in the podcast streets as a host/co-host of a Falcons show, and it's good to be back. And I've been chomping at the bit, and I figured what better way to get back in the game than with the fellows at Sports Talk ATL. And I got two of them here with me today. I've got Jake and I've got Alex. Jake, I'll turn it over to you. Let the people know who you are and where they can find you and your work.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Jake. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Can'tGuardJake and at SportsTalkATL.com, of course. I helped co-found the site back in 2015, and I've been working on it ever since. But I'm also a 1L at the University of Georgia School of Law.
Alex, turn it over to you. Let the people know who you are and where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, my name is Alex Lord. You can find me on Twitter at Go Sports Talk. Go spelled Geaux, as you can see. Go Tigers. I started writing for Sports Talk back in school in Baton Rouge. That's where I met the owner, Chase, and I met Jake through Chase. And I'm really excited about this. Let's get going.
So as everyone knows, the NFL Draft kicks off this Thursday night live from Cleveland, Ohio, and the stakes couldn't be higher for our Atlanta Falcons. This is arguably one of the more monumental draft classes in Falcons history, probably dating back to 2008 when the Falcons took Matt Ryan, 3rd overall. And part of the reason I thought this was such a great idea and great time to start this podcast was for that very reason. We're ushering in a new era of Falcons football. Falcons have a new GM in Terry Fontenot, new head coach in Arthur Smith. And that's leading a lot of people to believe that, they want to put their imprint and their stamp on their tenure as Falcons GM and head coach. And, with picking 4th overall in a quarterback-rich draft, the opportunity is there to turn the page officially on the Dimitroff era and the Ryan era and taking the quarterback of the future. We know Trevor Lawrence is going to go 1st overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars. We have a pretty good idea Zach Wilson's going to go 2nd overall to the New York Jets. And we also have a good idea the 3rd quarterback will go off the board by way of the San Francisco 49ers, who moved up with the Miami Dolphins and traded away 3 first-round picks to take their future quarterback. But with the Falcons at 4, that's why a lot of people believe, the draft does start at 4. It's anyone's best guess. Do they go quarterback? Or on the flip side, does Fontenot and Smith believe that Matt Ryan still has enough juice in the tank to play 3-4 years at a high level? And do they build around him and take advantage of this, win now window with Ryan and the core group that they have? And I think, that's where we should start this conversation. That's the hot button topic, in Falcons land is, what they're going to do with the 4th overall pick. I've gone on record on Twitter and elsewhere, and I think it's more, the latter than the former. And, part of my reasoning for that can kind of be summed up in 2 words, financial timeline. And what I mean by that, when you take a quarterback as early as the Falcons are positioned to do, part of the attraction and the allure there is that rookie contract, the value there. And for most teams picking at 4 and, coming off a 4-12 season, that would be the case. But that doesn't apply to the Atlanta Falcons. And a big part of that reason is, where they are at with their contracts, specifically with Matt Ryan's deal. It was reported a little over a month ago that they gave Matt Ryan the max restructure to create the necessary cap space, to fill out their roster this offseason. And by doing so, they pushed $14 million of guaranteed money down the road. So if the Falcons were to take a quarterback at 4 overall, you have to move on from Matt Ryan in 2022. I don't care what anyone says. you don't take someone that high and have him sit more than 1 year. So, if they were to take a quarterback at 4, you move on from Matt Ryan in 2022, there's 2 options. You cut or you trade him pre-June 1. With that comes a $40 million dead cap hit. And that would exceed the record just set by the Philadelphia Eagles with Carson Wentz by $7 million. It's not a record teams just want to set willy-nilly. Reason the Eagles had to do it, they had their hands tied. Carson Wentz didn't want to be there. The situation became toxic. They had to move on from him. That really doesn't apply with Matt Ryan in Atlanta. The other alternative is a post-June 1 cut, which if that was the case, they'd spread out the dead cap hit. They'd have 23 or so million in 2022, and the remainder 24 million would go on in 2023. The caveat with that is Matt Ryan's 2022 cap hit of 48 million would have to stay on the books until June 2nd. So they couldn't even build around their young quarterback until 2023 at the earliest. And even then, you have a $24 million dead cap charge still from Matt Ryan. So you're already setting the young quarterback back behind the 8 ball. Can't build around him until he's already going to be up for an extension then at that point. I mean, look at, the Ravens and the Bills with their quarterbacks now that have eclipsed their 3rd year, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. They're already in talks with an extension. So for me, that's what it's always boiled down to, is the fact that, again, the financial timeline doesn't make sense. You can't build around the young quarterback, and you're putting them at a disadvantage right from the start. So, long-winded response. I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. I'll turn it over to Alex first. Alex, how do you see, the 4th overall pick? How do you see the Falcons situation, and what do you anticipate happening on Thursday in round 1 for them?
So I agree with everything you said. The financials don't make any sense. And quite frankly, Fontenot hasn't shied away from even saying that. He's noted it on multiple occasions that they're in a difficult spot financially, and he didn't want to restructure Matt Ryan's contract. He just had no choice. And it's obvious in the numbers that you just alluded to. Where I think they'll go and where I would want them to go are 2 entirely different ways. I'll go with the former first. I think that it will be Justin Fields if he falls, with all agreeing to everything you said, just because I think that Terry Fontenot really is, trying to kind of put his foot in the door. He's getting his guys in here that he believes in. Outside of that, it's got to be Kyle Pitts. But I'm going to throw a wild card out here. And going back to New Orleans, Terry Fontenot and Mickey Loomis addressed the offensive or defensive line in every single draft in the first 3 rounds. Every single draft, they were hammering it just because there's so much turnover on offensive and defensive line, and finding a good guy can come. The Packers show you every single year they find some guy that's in the 5th round that turns out to be some incredible offensive lineman. So with that being said, Penei Sewell. And I say this because I truly believe he can come in and play guard right now. He's powerful enough to come in and play guard. The entire knock around him is his pass protection isn't necessarily where you'd want it to be. And it might not even be where the Northwestern tackle Rashawn Slater's is. But he's 20 years old. He will take his first snaps in the NFL as a 20-year-old. If everybody can remember when they're 20 years old versus what they are now, I'm only 23, and I'm significantly more defined in my reach and my grip strength, everything. This kid is going to grow into his body more. He can move in the run game like nobody I've ever seen at his size. His ability to stay balanced in space while also in tight spots is unparalleled. I mean, the team that drafts him is going to have to develop him. And what comes with offensive line experience is reps. He just needs reps. And Dwayne Ledford is one of the best in the business. He's a Falcons offensive line coach who was recently at Louisville. He helped Mekhi Becton pretty much reach first round status. He's the best in the business, and him and Arthur Smith's vision for a zone scheme offense aligned ideally. So basically, I would kind of task the coaching staff to make best of the draft pick in my choice of Phineas Wall. But going back to it, I do think it will be either a Justin Fields or Kyle Pitts. But, my preference is different for what they'll do. Jake?
Yeah, Jake, what do you think the Falcons do on Thursday?
So it really just depends. So Terry Fontenot has said from the beginning that they're going to address needs in free agency, and they're going to take the best player available in the draft. And if that's true, they're going to take Kyle Pitts because Kyle Pitts is the best player in this draft. I think he's better than Trevor Lawrence. I know Trevor Lawrence plays a premium position, but Kyle Pitts he's just a special player. And even though he doesn't play that premium position, he's not a quarterback, he's not an edge rusher, he's not an offensive tackle, he's not a cornerback. I don't think it matters. If you're talking about taking the best player on the board, if you're picking at 4 and the 3 quarterbacks are gone, it's easily Kyle Pitts. I don't think Justin Fields would be a bad selection. I can see the rationale there, especially when you only have 20 guys on the roster for 2022 before this draft class and before Calvin Ridley and Hayden Hurst potentially get their options picked up. But also in that same breath, I think that's an even better reason to trade down. As of right now, I really just don't think the Falcons are going to get an offer worth their time. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Washington football team or New England or maybe even Denver ponies up all they have, maybe 3 firsts, 2 picks this year, a couple day 2 picks down the road to move up to 4. And, if they do trade down, they have some good options. There's J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, Elijah Vera Tucker, maybe Rashawn Slater, Greg Newsome, who's one of my favorite players in the draft. There's just so many ways you can go addressing positions of need with picks like 15 through 60. There's just such a flush of talent there, in my opinion. And I hate to quote the guy, but the words from Colin Cowherd ring in my head every day. Do you know what you could get for that 4th overall pick? I think it would be a lot. So my first option is to trade down, especially looking at the cap sheet. When you owe $170 million to 20 guys and you need a 53-man roster, you have issues. So I think trading down is the best move. I've thought it's been the best move since the beginning. I just don't know if the Falcons are going to get a trade package that's worth moving out of that spot for.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think trading down is the ideal number 1 scenario for them, just because, you mentioned not a lot of guys under contract in next year and not a lot of guys under contract this year. I tweeted out the other day, Falcons are last with fewest amount of players under contract currently, which is 56. Next closest is 61, the LA Chargers. So they'd be best served if they can accumulate draft capital, cheap contracts. But at the same time, I also agree. I don't know if they're going to get an offer. The fact that Justin Fields sounds to be sliding down boards, you would think that would increase the value of the 4th overall pick, but the NFL seems to be kind of split on him for whatever reason. And, we appear to be heading towards maybe a Deshaun Watson 2.0 situation in the draft with him. As far as, Penny Sewell, I think would be an outstanding pick as well. He just hasn't seemed to be getting any traction. If they were to take him, though, I think he could have a similar impact to the Falcons' offensive line that Tristan Wirfs just had this past year with Tampa. You plug and play, and it totally redefines your offensive line from day one. For me, I've gone back and forth on whether he should be the guard or maybe I don't know, move on from McGarry or maybe try McGarry at guard and put Sewell more at the natural tackle spot. But that would be a decision that, I'd leave up to Dwayne Ledford and, have complete trust in him to make the right call there. But speaking of offensive line, the next topic I want to kind of jump to here, and I don't think it's getting enough traction in the media as far as the Falcons beat goes, is the offensive line and how little depth there is beyond the top 5. And the top 5, that includes Matt Gano, he of only 4 career starts, and second-year player Matt Hennessy, who's only had 2 starts. So there's really nothing behind it. They signed Josh Andrews to a vet min contract. He's not a guy you want playing significant snaps. in this upcoming season. And then beyond him is a bunch of futures contract players and practice squatters. So while we're kind of split and undecided or not really sure what the Falcons are going to do in round one, I feel very confident in saying the Falcons are going to take an offensive lineman fairly early, probably within the first 3 rounds. And I think it's a good bet they're going to take more than one. And this is a good draft class to do it. It's one of the strengths of the class, in my opinion, is the offensive line. So I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts. Who are some of your favorites on day 2 at O-line, and maybe even some sleepers on day 3 for developmental talent? Jake, I'll let you go first on this one.
Yeah, when I was doing my tape study, one of the main guys that always stood out to me every time I watched Oklahoma was Creed Humphrey. He's a left-handed center, which is a little bit strange. That's not something you see very often. But he always seemed to be in command, and I really appreciate that about him. I really like Creed Humphrey. I think he's a plug-and-play starter, instant Alex Mack replacement. And another natural fit that I really like is Wyatt Davis. He didn't have the best 2020, but he's another guy that I think you can absolutely from day one start at left guard, and he's going to make an impact. I think he's an absolute steal at 35, especially if you don't move back and get a guy like Elijah Vera Tucker in the first round. Wyatt Davis is a guy that can immediately make an impact. And as far as the second round goes, don't take this as a shot at him. I absolutely love Landon Dickerson, but there's been a lot of chatter about his injuries, and a lot of people are saying he could be in for a slide. If he is, I'd happily pick him up later in the draft. He might be a little bit of a gamble with a second round pick. That could also be some team trying to devalue him a little bit so they can steal him. But his character, blocking ability, absolutely love Landon Dickerson. And a couple other guys in the second round potentially. If they want some more flexibility, you could go with a guy like Alex Leatherwood, who's played tackle, guard. He's moved all over Alabama's offensive line. And Brady Christensen, he's a bigger guy, and he played, I believe he played tackle for BYU, but I feel like he's a guy that could kick inside with that athleticism. And, round 3, early day 3, you start looking at guys like Quinn Miners, Trey Smith, Josh Myers, Ben Cleveland out of Georgia. One of my favorite sleepers is Spencer Brown out of Northern Iowa. He dominated the Senior Bowl. I think he's 6'8", 350. Massive kid, would be a great developmental swing tackle. And if you're looking at guys, the Falcons have a couple extra 5th and 6th round compensation picks. Really like Drake Jackson out of Kentucky. I think he's a guy you can immediately plug in at center and play. He's not going to be the highest ceiling guy, but I think he's a guy who immediately can help out and immediately plug a hole, depending on how the team feels about Matt Hennessy. I hate to talk about Matt Hennessy like this, like I'm replacing him, but he didn't really get an off season last year. But it's getting to a point where he didn't play very well at all, and you have to consider that. But a couple other names I like: Kendrick Green out of Illinois, David Moore out of Grambling, another guy that had a great Senior Bowl, Robert Hansey out of Notre Dame, Alaric Jackson out of Iowa. And the last guy I want to talk about too is very interesting, Walker Little. I don't know where he's going to go. He might go a little bit higher, but right now TDN has him in like the 150 range. Former 5-star recruit, I believe he was a top 5 high school recruit. Hasn't played since 2019, but physically gifted, played really well when he did play. Obviously, injuries are a concern. But I think Walker Little would make a great developmental swing tackle. Maybe you can kick him into guard to play now. That might be a little bit of a reach, but round 4, round 5, I think he'd be a nice pickup.
Alex, any other names that Jake didn't hit on that you like from offensive lineman?
He named them all, but I'd like to explore some of the ones that he did name. Brady Christensen, I love him.
Same.
Is just a couple pounds over 300, which is a little concerning at guard, but he plays stronger than his weight indicates. He is extremely athletic. I think he tested in like the 90th or 85th percentile in every single measurement at BYU's pro day. He is perfect for Arthur Smith's offense. I mean, he is perfect. I think that he is going to go to somebody in the 3rd round, and he's going to be a starting right tackle in this league for a very long time.
I'll give you a team who I think I shot my shot on Twitter on this. I think Green Bay Packers are going to pick him.
I think the same exact thing.
It seems like a Packer through and through.
Yep. And then I want to go into Robert Hansey and Kendra Green. I like both of them as later round prospects. So Hansey, and if you watch him on tape, I only watched a few games, but he plays ugly. he's like the definition of ugly but effective. He played exclusively at right tackle, but he impressed at the Senior Bowl on the interior. He projects as an interior lineman because of his length. But his speed and movement skills project him very well in a horizontal rushing attack, which is exactly what Arthur Smith wants to do. So, I wouldn't say he could come in from day one and start at left guard, but he could definitely be brought in to compete. Now, Kendrick Green is somebody I truly believe can come in and start from day one at either guard or center position. He constantly improved throughout his collegiate career. In the run-heavy offense he was in Illinois, that he can, move people out of the way, which is the most important thing in this offense. He's got incredible athleticism for his size, even if it doesn't really look like it. And he's really just an underrated prospect. I mean, he came into the Senior Bowl and showed out at center. But he could play guard as well. But I also think that, Jake, you're right. We can highlight these prospects without discrediting Matt Hennessy or Caleb McGarry, because I think, his rookie year, McGarry was, probably like the 29th, 30th, maybe even the worst right tackle in the league. His second year, he improved. I mean, he wasn't average, but he improved on his first year. That's all you can ask for. And if you go by the improvement he made from his first to second year, he'll finish somewhere around an average right tackle in his third year, especially with a superior offensive line coach. And just like you said, without Hennessy giving us any real snaps, you can't really be sure just how it or not it he is. So, these are all just later day prospects that I like, but, I'm more scheme than the actual player itself. And all three guys that I detailed are perfect scheme fits.
Yeah, I like that Kendrick Green one a lot, and that's one I can definitely see being a future Falcon just because of that flexibility. He can be left guard or he can push Hennessy at center, which, to talk a little bit about Hennessy from my perspective, Hennessy was my favorite pick in last year's draft class just because I thought the value of where they got him at was perfect. I thought he was a second rounder. They got him in round 3. And again, we saw him at the end of the season when Alex Mack went down those last 2 games, and he held his own. Again, there were struggles, but look who they went up against. They went up against the 2 Super Bowl representatives, Kansas City Chiefs and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with stud defensive linemen across
Chris
the board.
Jones and Vita Vea, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't get more challenging than that for a rookie. So, and Alex brought up the point about Dwayne Ledford, and I think we have to, kind of scratch some of the evaluations on some of the offensive linemen under Chris Morgan and see what Dwayne Ledford's going to do, which I think he's going to do wonders for these guys and help take their game up a notch. So, I want Hennessy to get the full shot. I don't think he should be unchallenged. I think they're definitely going to bring in some competition. There was a lot of rumors and rumblings in free agency that they were looking at centers. It ended up not happening. But again, I think this is where in the draft class, you're going to maybe look at a Kendrick Green who can play center and guard, and there's going to be an open competition, and may the best man win. Hopefully it's Matt Hennessy. And if Green can be the left guard, then that makes your unit that much better, I think. So, all great guys you listed. I think you kind of just put on display how deep this offensive line class is, and I'm looking forward to seeing who the Falcons kind of pick out of that bunch. So moving on to the next topic, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the defense. Defense now led by mastermind Dean Pease, who I'm very ecstatic to see what he can do. A guy who's done more with less kind of throughout his entire coaching career. But that doesn't mean we can ignore the defense either in the draft. And, you can pretty much go through every level of the defense and can add talent to it because every level does need it. So I kind of want to throw the question at you guys. What do you see as the biggest need? If there's one thing that the Falcons do address on defense, what would you like that to be? Alex, we'll let you go first on this one.
I'm going to go with safety. And it's for one of 2 reasons. Obviously, corner is concerning. Edge is very concerning. But I pick safety just because this year we have 2 one-year stop guys in Deron Harmon and Eric Harris. And I'm a big proponent of Deron Harmon. I think that he is ideal in this defense. I mean, he is the perfect guy. He played in Bill Belichick's 3-3-5. I can't rave enough about this guy. And Falcons fans are going to be happy with what he puts on the field if he's healthy. I promise you that. But with that being said, there's nobody behind him. There's a Jalen Hawkins, and that's really it. So this isn't necessarily a short-term problem, but more of just, a long-term solution. I'd like to talk about 3 guys individually, and this is going to kind of relate to the offensive side where I'm just honing on versatility, and even more so in Dean Pease's defense versus Arthur Smith's offense. It's Richie Grant, Aaron Robinson, and James Wiggins. So I'll start with my favorite safety of the class. It's Richie Grant. He could play any role in Dean Pease's defense. He's actually very similar to Deron Harmon. He possesses enough sideline-to-sideline range to play single high. He is good enough to in man-to-man to take tight ends and running backs and out of the backfield. He has incredible ball skills, but he also packs a punch as a run defender. I will say he gets caught in traffic quite a bit. He's a lighter guy. So if an offensive lineman got his hands on him in space, it wouldn't be great. But other than that, there's no perfect prospect ever. So, he can work in the slot. He can work in single high. He can rotate down from a 2-high look. He can do anything that Dean Pease could ask him to do. Aaron Robinson was a Swiss Army knife for the Knights defense. He played mostly in the slot, where he kind of translates best to. He can blitz from the slot. He did all of this in college. He had adequate run support, and he even dropped deep in some cover 3 looks. So I would kind of compare him to an Antrell Roll type, where he's more of a cover safety, but he's still, Antrell Roll packed a nasty punch himself, And then last is James Wiggins, who is an absolute workout warrior. I think Jake included him in his an article. Yeah. I mean, this guy, he would be one of the top safeties if not for the injuries hampering him, which makes me, he's a long shot because I do believe most of the prospects in this draft are going to be reliable, both mentally and physically, no injury history, no, their heads are focused. That's what I think they're going to build the culture around. But Wiggins played out of his mind at Cincinnati. He played both safety spots. He's super aggressive in run support. His football IQ is constantly on display when he is out there, especially when he's in the deep center. But every single one of these 3 prospects I had can line up in multiple safety positions. Deron Harmon can do it. Eric Harris can do it, but it's kind of iffy. He's more box than, I wouldn't trust him deep, but he also has a tackling issue, missing some tackles last year at a kind of a concerning rate. So I didn't really see that other than he's a high character individual who's very trustworthy, great communication on the back end. So maybe they're kind of anticipating some young guys getting in there that need that veteran leadership who's communicating what is and isn't on the back end. And that's what Wiggins actually does the best is he is consistently in the right position, putting his guys in the right position because of all that communication. But those are my 3 guys, and each one of them are kind of scattered throughout. Richie Grant, Aaron Robinson closer to the front. I think that Richie Grant could get taken in the first round. Hopefully he doesn't. He falls to the second round at the Falcons. A lot of people have him going in the 3rd round, but I think analysts have this one wrong. I think this guy is legit. Aaron Robertson a little bit after him, and then James Wiggins, because of the injury history, I think could go in the later rounds. But on defense, at least for the long-term picture, safety.
Yeah, Richie's one of my favorite players in this class as well, and being ecstatic if we can get him in round 2. And I would agree. I don't think he's getting out of round 2. I mean, you look at last year's safeties, Grant Delpit and Antoine Winfield, where they kind of went in the 40s. I kind of think similar thing for Richie Grant and, guys like Trayvon Moehrig and even Javon Holland from Oregon. And I think Richie probably profiles best in the deep half, but is versatile enough to play all around. And if you look at the depth chart of the Falcons, Jalen Hawkins and Eric Harris, as you mentioned, probably more boxy safeties. There's not much behind Duron Harmon right now in the deep half of the field. So I think Richie Grant could be that option, and you slowly work him in 3 safety sets, or he takes over for Duron Harmon maybe later in the season. Jake, what do you think? What's the biggest need in your opinion for the Falcons, and how do you think they address it?
I don't know if it's the biggest need, but I'm going to go secondary too, but I'm going to talk about cornerback. I don't know if I would call it the biggest need, but I would say that it's one that I think could be the most opportunistic, I guess you would say. Going back to what Alex said, even if you get a good safety prospect like a Javon Holland or a Richie Grant, those are guys you can plug into the slot immediately. Kendall Sheffield struggled last year after showing a little promise the year before. But slot corner is still a big need for the Falcons. I don't know if they'll try Isaiah Oliver out there. At this point, I doubt it. Unless they move back in the first round and pick up a Patrick Surtain or a J.C. Horn or a Greg Newsome, I imagine Isaiah Oliver is still going to be on the boundary. So, you can still pick up one of those safety prospects and stick them in the nickel to where they can contribute, which I think Dean Pease will do because how he likes to move guys around. But a good secondary can help out a pass rush. I do Fabian Rosa. But the entire cornerback room is suspect at best. Let's be honest. AJ Tyrell had a very good start to his rookie season. He kind of faded in the past few weeks, talking about going against Tampa Bay and Kansas City, 2 very, very good wide receiver groups. But, if you're going to be a number 1 corner in this league, you got to be able to go against anybody. And I'm not saying AJ Tyrell can't do that. Corner is one of the toughest positions to adjust to as a rookie. But Isaiah Oliver, he's on the last year of his deal. Maybe he'll be back. Maybe he won't be. Other than that, what do you really have there? Darqueze Dennard is gone. You have Kendall Sheffield. It's just not a good-looking room to me. And, if you do trade back, I still have some concerns about the top corner prospects. Not saying they're going to be bad players, but, Patrick Surtain, scouts say he lacks top-end speed. I'm not a big proponent of drafting slow cornerbacks, which I don't think he's slow. But, if he was this perfect cornerback prospect, he'd be in consideration at 4. J.C. Horn, I like J.C. Horn a lot. Freak athlete, good ball skills. But when he gets beat, his first instinct is to hold on for dear life, and he will grab and hold all day. And, that doesn't get called as much of college, but in the NFL, absolutely. Greg Newsome, as much as I love him, a little bit of an injury history, can get a little grabby too. But I think all 3 of those guys would be great picks if they did trade back. But you can even look at later round guys. I like Kelvin Joseph out of Kentucky, very raw. He's a guy you would probably have to start out on the bench, but has all the traits, great ball skills. And if you want to dip into day 3 or late day 2, day 3, Paulson Adebo out of Stanford, Ifeatu Melifonwu out of Syracuse, Elijah Molden, Trill Williams out of Syracuse. There's a lot of guys in this class I can be talked into. I think the talent does fade a lot as you get into day 3. There's some decent corners on day 2, early day 3, and I think the Falcons at least need to get one.
Yeah, I'll go in a different direction. I'll play devil's advocate, and I'll go edge. I agree with you both. I really think secondary's probably the top need for the Falcons, and I think secondary too is going to be very important in Dean Pease's scheme, just because he likes to dial up different type of blitzes and pressure packages, and you need reliable guys on the back end in order to do so. So agree with either cornerback or safety, but we'll take a different approach to it here. We'll go edge. And again, edge, you can make the argument it is more of a need, both in the short term and the long term, just because of the fact that, your best edge guy at the current moment in time is Dante Fowler, who you had to negotiate a pay cut for, which should tell you all you need to know really about how he played in his first season as a Falcon. Kind of is trending towards being a one-hit wonder or being a product of lining up against the next to the best defensive player on the planet, or maybe in NFL history, in Aaron Donald. And that helped parlay him into that contract that we all regret the Falcons and Thomas Dimitroff gave him. He's likely only going to be here one more year. They voided his last year of his deal. And all the other guys on the roster are on 1-year rentals. Steven Means, Jacob Mariner, Kiki Mingo. So there's literally nothing under contract at edge in 2022, which is a very scary thought. So they have to address this. It's not the greatest edge class. Jalen Phillips is my edge 1, and him and Azeez Ojulari are probably the only 2 guys I feel comfortable taking in round 1. Certainly don't feel comfortable taking them in the top 10. So this would come in a trade down scenario if the Falcons were to, find a trade partner come Thursday. Beyond that, it's the day 2 guys that really is when you start entering the conversation of maybe the Falcons dip into this edge class. Guys like Joseph Asai, maybe Jason Owe, who, me personally, I hope someone else takes the risk on him. He's too raw. If fans hated Vic Beasley, I can only imagine the takes that would be thrown Jason Owe's way if he was taken highly by the Falcons in the draft. Peyton Turner is a guy I think is getting overlooked. I consider him on day 2 of the draft. And then as far as a couple sleepers go, a guy that I really like, a diamond in the rough from Duke, is Chris Rumpf, whose dad is an NFL coach, and there actually is a bit of a connection. I believe Chris Rumpf coached at Alabama with Nick Saban. So again, I think it's very important to consider the Saban and Dean Pease connection when it comes to how the Falcons plan to fill out this defense for as long as Dean Pease is the coordinator here. And, given that kind of distant connection with Rumpf and Saban and Pease, I think Rumpf's a guy who's, probably one of the more polished pass rushers in this class. Led the nation in pressure percentage over the last 2 years. The knock on him is his size. Right now, he's solely going to be a situational pass rusher. But there's a role for guys like that in the NFL. And, as he starts adding weight and becomes NFL strong, he can carve out more of a role. So to find him potentially in round 4, that's an ideal, draft scenario in my mind, which we're going to get to in a moment as far as what our ideal scenarios are. And then another guy I want to throw out there, talked about Jason Owa. I think Penn State pass rusher Shaka Toney is going to be a better pro than Jason Owa. I know Owa, freakish athlete, has the raw tools that you want. But Shaka didn't test too far behind him. And, Penn State guys test well. So, Shaka had the thresholds you want to see from a testing standpoint, but he had the production that you look for. So he's a guy that I'd much rather have for where he's going to be valued, which is probably round 4, maybe even round 5, than where O is going to go, which is probably no later than round 2. So that's kind of the guys I'd look to target from edge. Again, not a great edge class, but I think you can find, not a star pass rusher unless you're getting Phillips. I think Phillips or Ojulari are the only guys that can potentially be stars. Maybe Kwity Paye, but I think Kwity Paye has a bit to go as far as a rush standpoint. He can be an early down player and be effective there. But as far as true superstars, alphas, I think it's only going to be 2 guys. I think it's going to be Phillips and Ojulari. And again, if you're not moving down, you're unlikely to get those guys. So I kind of just alluded to it. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's just what's frustrating about this class. There is no Chase Young. There is no Myles Garrett. There's nobody like that.
Luck, right?
And, I thought Greg Rousseau might have been able to be that guy, but he opted out. And if you look at his tape from last year, a lot of the times he lined up on the interior. He bullied centers and smaller interior linemen. And a lot of the time, too, he had 15.5 sacks. I'd be willing to say he probably ran into about 9 of those just on accident. He'd be completely out of the play. The quarterback would break the pocket and run right into his lap. He's not a guy I'm willing to roll the dice on. I may not even take him with a 2nd-round pick. He does have physical tools. He is a nice-looking prospect. But I personally, as a Falcons fan, I'm done with the whole he's got a high motor and he really wants to play hard. I'm done with it.
Do you get Robert Nkemdiche vibes from him at all? Because that's kind of what I think. A guy that's been talked about as like a late 1st-round pick, got the size, got the tools, but I don't think he's ever going to amount to much.
Yeah, in between the ears, they might be a little bit different. Not to speak on Robert Kimdichie, speak ill on him, but it was obvious that I don't think he really cared about football that much. I can't say yes or no to that with Greg Rousseau. The opt-out doesn't tell me much in that regard. Plenty of guys opted out, and they were completely fine. But, even if you look to, like, Micah Parsons, if you want to call Micah Parsons an edge rusher, sure. I call him a tweener because I don't know what he's going to play. He's not super great in coverage. He's not super great as a pass rusher to me. He's kind of that jack of all trades, master of none. And when you look at front seven edge prospects, even Caleb Phillips with his medicals, I don't know if I'd consider any of them until like 25 around that range. So
that's fair.
It's difficult.
Yeah. I just think with Phillips, as long as, again, and that's what these scouting departments and front offices are supposed to do, is get this medical background and get this information. If they give him a passing mark there, I think he's got everything else. He's got the pedigree, he's got the pass rush arsenal, he's got the athletic profile. So that's why, again, that's the only missing piece is the medicals. And it's concussions; they're fluky, so you never know.
Right.
But I'd be willing to take a chance on him because I think he has everything else.
He already has medically retired once, and that is
scary.
Really concerning if you're going to spend a round one pick on him.
Right, and that's a fair point. Yeah,
my whole point
they can't take chances. They can't take chances.
You're right. I think that Falcons fans can guarantee one thing this draft. In the first 3 rounds, maybe 4, maybe the entire round, at least the first 3 picks or the first 3 rounds, Terry Fontenot is not going to select somebody that maybe turns out well, or he might have a good, medical checkup, because these team doctors haven't actually gotten their hands, on him and moved him around and felt these things. These medical reports are very sketchy. So I don't think, if it's off the field, if it's on the field, I think that they want somebody who may not be as refined, like some of the guys you're talking about. I don't think that matters. I think it more matters about what's up here to Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith. They have repeatedly stated how they want tough and smart and dedicated football players, and that's not everybody. Not everybody can wake up and do the grind 365 odd days a year, whatever, however long these guys do. But one thing is consistent. I think that they're going to be drafting people that are high character individuals who they're not going to have to worry if they're going to be here every single day. They will be here and ready to show up and work hard. That's the only thing I could almost guarantee you this draft.
Yeah, and, we were talking off air the other day about this. And to that point, look at the free agents that they brought in. Duron Harmon, Cordero Patterson, Mike Davis, just to name a few. I mean, all those guys are dependable, reliable, got a good head on their shoulders, good for the culture. Eric Harris, I think that's the main reason they brought him in, because of what he can do for the culture.
Not on the field.
Yeah, because he's just pretty much an average player, replacement level player for the most part. But it's what he's going to do for the locker room and bring to the young guys that they do bring in, which is a point Eric made in his introductory press conferences. He realizes they're going to bring in young guys, and he was brought in solely to kind of groom them and mentor them. So, yeah, I think you're going to see a very straight edge, clean cut draft profile from each of the picks that Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith make this coming weekend. So let's. I would love it. Sign me up. So let's top off the show. Let's give our best ideal draft scenario for the Falcons this weekend. First 4 rounds only. Alex, start us off. What do you think is an ideal scenario for the Falcons?
Okay, so going back to my first statement, I'm going to stick with it. My guns. Penei Sewell, 4th overall. Will cancel out the whole trade back scenario, just what the Falcons have 1 through 4. Penei Sewell, Richie Grant at 35, Paulson Adebo in the 3rd round, and then Kendrick Green in the 4th round. So, addressing the offensive line more than once, addressing the defensive backfield more than once. You can argue there should be a running back built in somewhere there, but I really think that they're confident that Cordero Patterson is going to carry the rock like more than he's ever has in his career. He's listed on the depth charts as a running back kick returner. So, yes, he's still here to be a threat on the special teams, but I think he is here and he could be great in this offense that just allows him to kind of, go out to the side, pick a hole, run through it. I mean, it's very easy in his own scheme to just kind of follow your offensive line as soon as you see daylight, just go. So it did pain me a little bit not to pick up running back somewhere in there because I do think that it should be addressed. How I address the running back, if in my fake world, is you pick up one or two every single year in the fourth round or later. One of them's going to stick. And you know what? It's not really about who the running back is. It's your scheme and offensive line. Two good offensive linemen that can come in there. Penei Sewell can start immediately pretty much wherever you need. He's been training at right tackle. So if you felt that McGarry would be better on the inside, which I don't think he would be, you could do that. Kendrick Green can come in and compete at that guard spot and at the center spot. So I tried to find value more so than positions, but it just lined up that the positions, are all neat.
And when it comes to running back too, I mean, they do have a forgotten man in Quadri Olson, and maybe they like what they saw in the limited time that Quadri did see the field, because that Ito Smith, I think, cut surprised us all. There was very little cap benefit from it. So who's to say it doesn't have something to do with liking Quadri Olson, and maybe there's a 1-2 punch at bell cow with Davis and Ollison, and then Patterson's going to see a lot of the field. As a gadget player and as a running back, I do agree. I think he's going to see a lot of carry and a lot of run. So yeah, I mean, that's a great top four addressing two major weaknesses is offensive line depth and secondary play. So certainly would be happy with that if that's the direction that they went in. Jake, what do you got for us? What's your ideal draft scenario for the Falcons?
I will say before I start, when we're talking about running backs in this class, as you get later into this class, you see a lot of guys who are just not going to be feature running backs for one reason or another. Either their bodies, like a Javon Hawkins, Chris Sims had him ranked third for some reason. His body's not going to hold up. His body's not going to hold up to being a 3-down running back. But there is a guy, 5th or 6th round, Elijah Mitchell out of Louisiana, about 5'10", 215. I think he had one of the best. I think he was in the top 80 for RAS, which relative athletic score. Just takes a screenshot of his pro day measurements. I think he's a guy you could pick up that could be that feature back. There's always a running back taken on day 3 that ends up being just crazy good, like an Aaron Jones, somebody like that. And I think Elijah Mitchell could be that guy. But if this is my ideal draft scenario, obviously, like I said, I would trade down. My partner or my sweet spot would probably be the Washington football team. I think they are crazy enough to give you 3 first-round picks for I guess QB4 if you want to call it that. But I don't think Justin Fields would be my QB4. They have an extra 3rd-round pick, so I think you could get a 2nd and a 3rd in this draft, even if it means you get less picks later on. But that's just what I'll roll with. You can't predict these type of things. Round 1, going Greg Newsome, the 2nd out of Northwestern. He's my CB1 in this class. I think he has the best hips, has fantastic ball skills. Ran a 4.38, tested pretty well athletically. I can't pay enough high praise to Greg Newsome II. His pro comp is Jair Alexander, and I think he could very easily reach that as long as he stays healthy. He has had some knee problems, but he looked good in 2020. Didn't look slow at all. Big fan of his. Round 2, I'm going Wyatt Davis. When you can get a guy who is a plug and play at a position of need, and I know drafting for need typically isn't the best strategy, but with the way the Falcons have been in free agency, they're kind of backed into that corner. If you take a guy like Wyatt Davis, he will be your starting left guard from day one. And I think he's going to be pretty good at that. He's one of those guys. I don't think he'll be to the level of Quentin Nelson, but I think he could genuinely have Pro Bowl potential from day one, just starting at left guard. When you have a plug-and-play starter at a position of need like that, it's just a no-brainer pick to me. If you want to go Creed Humphrey, if you want to go with Javon Williams, who's my RB1, I'm not going to argue with you on at the top of the second, has a lot of talent. But with that extra second-round pick, I'm going to go Javon Holland. I think the pick number is about 51, and Javon Holland's ranked about 56 by TDN. love Javon Holland. He was absolutely elite in the nickel at Oregon. I think he was the best slot defender in all of college football via PFF. So my pro con from him, I think he's going to be like a Desmond King, a guy who you can drop back to free safety. He's probably not going to offer you much in the box, but he can drop down to the nickel and be an elite slot defender. You're killing two birds with one stone. I think he's a perfect pick there if you pick up an extra second-round pick. And with the Falcons pick in round 3, I'm going to go with the popular pick. I'm going to go Milton Williams. Dude's just an athletic freak. I think outside of arm length, he had Aaron Donald beaten almost every category as far as his pro day and his measurements. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Aaron Donald. That's just a different breed. That's just a different breed of man. But that's another guy. You're drafting him on the interior of the defensive line, which is a sore spot right now. Helps you kick Grady Jarrett out to defensive end. Helps Marlon Davidson, maybe get a little more space to operate. One of my only concerns with Milton Williams, only 10 tackles for a loss last season. That's a little concerning, but he's raw, and that's a bit of a gamble with a third-round pick. But when you pick up the extra pick from trading back, that's not as big of a deal, and you can take a gamble on somebody like that with tons of athletic upside. And I know you guys said you didn't think he was going out of round 2. I don't think he is either, but right now he's ranked 79th, so I'm going to go Richie Grant. Watched him at the Senior Bowl. This is the extra third-round pick, but, he was even on the boundary, going at it with the best of them. And it's so rare when you get a guy that's playing free safety, box safety, slot, boundary. He could end up being one of those guys who's a jack of all trades, master of none. But the fact that he can do that at such a point in his career, I think he's 24, so he's a bit of an older prospect. But the fact that he's already out on the boundary, that's very encouraging to me. And with a fourth-round pick, it's a toss-up between two guys. Dayo Odeyingbo out of Vanderbilt. He's in that Carlos Basham, Victor Dimukeje mold where he can play inside out. You can play him on the interior, kick him out to end. I think Odeyingbo might have some upside as a stand-up rusher, but he's coming off of a torn Achilles, so that's a little bit of a hiccup. Other than that, I love Patrick Johnson out of Tulane, highly productive in college, one of the most productive players in college football last year, tested very well athletically. I think he has a lot more projection as a 3-4 stand-up edge. So basically, it just boils down to solidifying both trenches and getting a lot of help in the secondary.
Yeah, the Williams and the Odeyingbo selections, that made me take a step back. I guess you're a little bit lower on the interior right now for the depth chart for Atlanta. That's one position where I think they're deepest at. I don't know, maybe they're not most talented at. But when you got Kaminsky and Marlon Davis, I think people are probably forgetting about. I think they're going to get a lot of run, and then obviously they have Davison and Sanat. We'll see what happens with Sanat. I've always been high on Sanat, so I think giving him I guess elaborate a little bit on
value at that point. Obviously okay. I'm using the Draft Network's board, and that's not perfect. You can't find two teams that have the same board, but it's the best estimation I have to go off of. I'm not going to make my own board. But, when you look around, the value I see there, it's just too hard to pass up, especially Milton Williams. His tape really isn't anything that special, but the kid eats up double teams, and he's a freak athlete. If you can coach him up properly, you're talking about freeing up Grady Jarrett. You're talking about freeing up Marlon Davidson. You're talking about freeing up maybe a Patrick Johnson or an Odeyingbo. And, that's really what it boils down to. Maybe you don't need a guy when there's not a guy in this draft class, but if you can get a bunch of guys who can play their role, who can eat up some space, who can, create a little chaos in their own little circle, you free up people to make plays. You help out the secondary by forcing the quarterback to rush and make quick decisions. I'm kind of hunting for value at that point. I'm a big fan of him and Patrick Johnson. Patrick Johnson's one of my draft darlings. It used to actually be Patrick Jones, but I'm very big on Patrick Johnson. I think he'd be perfect for Dean Pease as well because he's a guy that can go down, put his hand in the dirt, and rush off the edge as a linebacker.
I like Milton Williams because he is so athletic, like you said, that there's going to be a lot of times in Dean Pease's system where Grady Jarrett is going to be great, where they ask him to come off of the edge of, somewhere, some twist, some stunt. There's going to be lots of twists. There's going to be lots of stunts, whether it's with Deion Jones coming in the A gap and Grady Jarrett coming around him on the B gap. Whatever it might be, I think that Milton could do that similarly. He's that athletic horizontally that he could do that. So I do think that that scheme fit is good with Milton Williams.
It's certainly fair. So for me, I'll give a 2-for-1 special here. Version 1, I like to call make the Falcons offense the best in the league. I know some fans are probably going to be a little concerned, but I'm going offense to start. We're going Kyle Pitts round 1. We're going Javon Williams round 2, if not Najee. Najee's my guy. He's my number 1 draft crush. Would love for somehow him to fall to pick 35, but I don't think he gets past the Steelers. And round 3, we're going Quinn Miners or Trey Smith to plug in the left guard hole. And then round 4, I'm going to go defense finally. I'm going to go the diamond in the rough that I mentioned earlier in the show, Chris Rumpf. I think he could potentially be one of the better pass rushers to come out of this class, and I think he's getting a bit overlooked. But, look, I like this offensive draft class, I think, a little bit better than I like the defensive draft class. And I see a real opportunity here if they stay put at 4 to get a unicorn in Kyle Pitts, the best player in this class that's not a quarterback. In Arthur Smith's scheme, there's no way he flops. I think his potential might even get more realized if that makes any sense. If Kyle Pitts came to Atlanta, former tight end coach and Arthur Smith, I think he's going to know exactly how to use him. Arthur Smith also led the league last year in multiple tight end personnel, 2 tight end sets, and he was 3rd in 3 tight end sets. So Kyle Pitts on the field, absolute mismatch nightmare, puts defenses in a conflict, which is Arthur Smith's main goal as a play caller. And then with Javon Williams, the North Carolina alum, I'm kind of with you, Jake. I think he's, if not RB1, he's definitely RB2. I like him better than ETN. He does everything well. He pass blocks, which I think is extremely important for a rookie running back, to get on the field early. You need to be able to pass protect and protect your franchise quarterback. Javonte will have no problems doing that. He can catch out of the backfield. He makes guys miss. He's a bulldozer when he gets his pad level low. A true bell cow, and can really, complete this offense. I know, and I agree with Alex's point about, it's not so much the running back, but your scheme and the blocking that matters. But when you can add a true featured back, I'll look at Derrick Henry. When you can add a monster running back and you have the scheme and the blocking to boot, it just turns your run game up a notch. So it would be too good to pass up on that opportunity. And then, we have to fill that one spot on the offensive line, or at least provide competition for Matt Gano at left guard. And I think Quinn Miners, if he can fall to 68, that's a dream scenario. The guy who just lit it up at the Senior Bowl proved that the uptick in competition, was not an issue for him. So if he can get there at left guard, I think, he's an Ali Marpet 2.0, and Ali Marpet's one of the better guards in football now. So if not him, Trey Smith, I think, would be great. The medicals are a little bit of a concern, which is why his stock has taken a little bit of a hit. But other than that, again, he was a guy that was getting round 1 consideration a year ago, and I think he would be a complete monster and a stud at left guard in this offense. And then I talked about Chris Rumpf. But for me, to make the offense elite, and I very strongly believe in order to get where you want to go in this league, which is back to the Super Bowl, one aspect of your football team has to be elite. And I don't think this Falcons offense is that far away from that point, considering who the play caller is, considering the core that they have with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, who's still a member of this team. And I do believe, despite the rumors this week, I think will be a member of the Falcons come 2021. Russell Gage, Calvin Ridley, the former first-round picks that they have on the offensive line already. I think adding those 3 guys can take them to be in a 30-point per game juggernaut and can get them back in contention to vie for a Super Bowl. So that's option 1. Option 2, we discussed the trade down, and again, I'm in full agreement. I call this captain trade down because that's kind of where I was several months ago, right from the start when we knew the Falcons were picking 4th overall. I thought it made a lot of sense. I think the ideal candidate, and again, we'll see what happens on Thursday. I think the Broncos are, in win now mode, or they should be. Their roster is pretty much complete besides quarterback. And if Justin Fields is there, I know that's very tempting for the Falcons to do. But the Falcons don't need it as much as the Broncos need it. And, George Payton, new GM, he can set his imprint by moving up to 4 and taking Justin Fields. And the Falcons can move back, acquire another day 2 pick. I think they probably will only get the 3rd round pick from the Broncos if that were to happen, plus a future first and hopefully another future, day 2 or day 3 pick. So with that being said, J.C. Horn's my cornerback 1 in this class. He narrowly edges Patrick Surtain. The Falcons will probably go Surtain in this scenario if this were to happen, just because, again, I think the Dean Pease and Nick Saban connections are very strong. I mean, you go back and look during Dean's time in Baltimore and New England and even Tennessee, they took Rashaan Evans, the middle linebacker from Alabama. They've taken a lot of Nick Saban players for the teams that Dean has coordinated. So that's something to keep an eye on for future drafts, if not this draft. They're gonna look to the Saban, Alabama talent pool. But for me, I take J.C. Horn. I think he's got all the ingredients to be one of the best cornerbacks in this game. And the reason I give him the edge is the swagger. If there's one thing a cornerback needs in this league, it's swagger. They're put on an island constantly. They go up against the best athletes in the game on a game-to-game basis, and J.C. Horn's got the stuff for that. So I would take J.C. Horn round 1. I love Landon Dickerson. You guys alluded to the medicals, and I think that's why he'd be available in round 2. I think I'm fine with him and the medicals. I mean, again, he didn't really play in the national championship, but the fact that he, made a concerted effort to get out there, coming fresh off the ACL, I think tells a lot about his character. And we mentioned the character is going to be huge for any, draft prospects that they take. And I think Landon checks that box and then some. So to get him, he can either compete at center or be a plug and play left guard. And again, you don't need to play him right now because you do have Matt Gano there, but eventually Landon would take over and could be a very, very good left guard. 2 round 3 picks. I'm going Peyton Turner, the edge from Houston. Again, someone I talked about earlier. I think he's underrated. Got the athletic profile you look for. Not a tweener by any means. He really is a true edge presence. And then the other guy is Tommy Tremble, who, if you're not going to get Kyle Pitts, Tommy Tremble is the tight end to target in this draft class. He's my tight end too. I think he's got some George Kittle in him. I'm not going to say he is George Kittle, but when I say that, I think his best football is in front of him. And, he's a ready-made blocker. He just has to work on his hands, work on the receiving aspect, but he has the athletic profile to get there in the near future. So, again, Arthur Smith loves tight ends. If he doesn't get Kyle Pitts, I look for him to make a concerted effort to get Tommy Tremble, since if they don't pick up Hayden Hurst's option, they don't have any tight ends under contract in 2022. And then lastly, I'm going to go with Andre Cisco, another guy dealing with the medicals, fresh off ACL several months ago. But a guy who's a legit ball hawk, led the nation in interceptions 2 years ago from Syracuse. Again, they're as Alex pointed out, they're okay at safety in the short term, but they definitely need to add someone long term to take over. And I think Cisco could be great value in round 4. And again, some guy, a guy that can help take away the football, which the Falcons have sorely needed the last several years. So that would be my captain trade down ideal scenario. But again, you can't go wrong with any of the scenarios we kind of laid out there. I know I can speak for all of us. We're super excited to see this draft class through. Again, it's going to be a big one. Terry and Arthur have a chance here to really, put their stamp on this and set a tone for what to expect moving forward for their tenure. Do they rebuild or do they reload? I tend to think they're going to reload. But whatever they do, I'm pretty confident with this coaching staff, and I'm pretty confident in the front office. You guys have any other closing remarks before we put this show to bed?
Yeah. It's going to be a bit of a bittersweet day if the Falcons do take Justin Fields at 4. I think Justin Fields is a fantastic quarterback. I think he's a great prospect. But you're signaling the end of the era of probably not even probably, the greatest player in franchise history with Matt Ryan. Julio Jones trade talks, I mean, I guess it's that time of year. They heat up every year, but I don't know if he will be traded after June 1st. But, if Justin Fields is the pick, you're talking about 2 years from now, the Falcons could look very, very different. And, as bittersweet as it would be, I can't help but be excited. Whoever the pick is going to be, I'm going to be behind them. I think it's unfortunate. A lot of people are going to get real torn up one way or the other. But I'm ready to get this show on the road, man. This feels like the most important draft of my adult lifetime. Matt, I was 12 when Matt Ryan was drafted. So,
yeah.
This is easily the most important Falcons draft of my lifetime. And, with a new regime, new coach, it is so much uncertainty. I'm ready to get going.
Right. Yeah. I'd just like to add one thing on top of the one guarantee I already said about the character has to be high for every prospect. Another thing, this regime isn't going to draft somebody like an Isaiah Simmons that Arizona has done. A lot of NFL teams do this. Even though they're NFL teams, they still do dumb things where they draft these players without a real plan. Every single player that comes into the organization here on out, there will be a divisive plan to get him onto the field immediately or plan to get him onto the field. So there isn't going to be any incompetence with this group of guys. I can almost guarantee that. So wherever they do go with the fourth pick, Falcons fans, just give it a chance. You're going to have a knee-jerk reaction, and so are we. It's not going to please everybody, but, just give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to kick off, this new chapter with you guys. I mean, this was fun. We're going to be back hopefully every week. Next week we'll be back, depending on how, the draft unfolds and it's kind of an equal split offense, defense. I figured we might break down offense next week, defense the following week. But we got a lot to talk to. We missed some topics today. Obviously, the Julio Jones rumors have been popular. We didn't really touch on it too much, but I'm sure there'll be more talk of that. One point I would add on that, though, is just keep an eye on teams that need receiver in this draft, especially in round 1, round 2, and whether or not they pass on them. Because I don't know, maybe that's a sign of who are the teams the Falcons have been talking to. So that's something to keep an eye on. Again, I don't think Julio Jones is going to get traded, but it's definitely the possibilities are more than zero.
But both got 2 first rounders. They don't take Terrace Marshall or Rashad Bateman with one of those. They're available. That's
it could be a sign. So keep an eye on that. Appreciate everyone that tunes in and listens to this show. Make sure you subscribe on all the platforms that we're going to be at. Follow us on Twitter. And we'll see you next week to recap the draft. And as always, go Falcons.